man. Should be going here in just a little bit.
Let me hear how I sound, but so far sounds good.
Good, good. Sounds you can hear me?
Yep,
All
yep.
right.
Sounds awesome so far.
All right, cool, cool. Let me just do a couple of things here. Get us going.
So what's the plan for tonight, buddy?
X, second part of 10, and then you guys can talk a little X too, as it is relatively new to me. I haven't really played it. I'm going to run ye old. All right, we are live. That is awesome. We have been live for a minute or so. Got the chat rolling here. Kind of. Okay. All right. Did you do a mic check, a record check?
I did. I'll do it one more time, but should be sounding good. Let me give it one more go here.
Yeah, I'll give it another one too.
Yeah, checking then
This
this
is
guy
me
out here.
checking my stuff.
Perfect. Boom. We are ready to go.
Ready to rock? All right.
Would you look at us?
Who would have thought?
Let's look at.
Not me.
Who'd have thunk?
Not me. Gonna have 0 followers. That's all right. Ain't no thing.
They will come.
If you build it, they will come. Let me put this out on the ye old. All right, retweet. Retweet with comment. Oh shoot. Here we go. All right, now I think we are good to go. Let me put this in front of me so we actually get some decent sounding recording without this. All right. Cool. All right, let me take a look here one more time. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Man, I sound good.
Yes, you do.
All right, we'll wait.
That mic quality is top notch for you. It sounds crystal clear.
It does make a big difference. It definitely does. Definitely does, my lord. All right. Get Stan back and then kick this off doing 10-2. I'll have to let everybody know spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. If you haven't played 10, which, sometimes I think about, and I'll say this back on the show just for, actually, no, I'm not going to say it right now because I want to save it because I think it's good stuff.
Save that energy.
I want to save that energy.
Bottle it up.
Bottle it up. Save it up.
Oh, I'm doing audio testing.
All right. And otherwise, we should be good to go.
Check. Oh, shit. Check. Weird. Check, dude. There we go. Okay. If I push the right button, it will work.
If.
You guys hear me all good?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Hold
Cool.
on. Sorry. Got another
Check two.
malfeasance, if you will. Okay. Let's get everything situated here. I don't want it like that. All right. You ready, Stan? Scoot man?
I think we're set.
All right. I am hitting my record button right now. So let's go ahead and give it a clap. We'll do 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm ready when you guys are.
Bring it.
Actually, I need to drop the kids off real quick. Be back in like a half hour. No.
Say,
We're
geez,
good.
man. You gotta see a doctor. All right, ready?
Yeah, good to go.
All right. Hey, and welcome to I Want to Be Your Canary. This is a Final Fantasy podcast. Tonight, as always, I am graced with my dear Final Fantasy brethren, Mr. Dyston.
Hey, yo, what's up, guys?
And Mr. Scooter.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, tonight we are on our second part of Final Fantasy X. Last week we talked about the mechanics of the game and some of the intricacies of the game. And today we are going to talk more about the story. So I should probably start this off with spoilers alert. Spoilers alert. Big time spoilers alert, right?
I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, and for yourself too, Colin. Get the earmuffs going because I know some of this might be news.
And that's okay. You know, as I was talking about spoilers, and I thought, well, this game's been out since what, 2001, 2002, and for a whole lot of people, it's probably not spoilers, but there
Right.
are people that it is spoilers. For one, is my cousin who I've got hooked on Final Fantasy now, but kind of imagine, like, sometimes I think about this. I'm jealous of some of the people out there who've never played Final Fantasy before and get to experience it all, if you know, as a brand new thing
For the first run, yeah.
for the first run.
Well,
Yeah.
especially with all the remasters and everything they're doing lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have another friend right now that's playing the remaster of 7. It's her first time playing a Final Fantasy, and
Oh, geez.
I'm just like, play the OG, play the OG, play the OG. Like, part of the remaster,
Context.
yeah, part of the remaster, I feel like, is enjoying, like, comparing it to the first one, right?
Absolutely.
But
Well, I guess we'll find out what her opinion is at the end.
that is true. That is true. We'll see. Cool. Well, hey, I'm really excited talking about 10.2 today. Hey, I'm just going to start off with this because I think I forgot, or I have a tendency to forget. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Canary Podcast. That's at CanaryPodcast at Canary Podcast.
Past sixth grade. Nice job.
Thank you. Actually
Good
teach
spelling.
sixth grade, so
No,
it's good
no.
that I've usurped the student has now become the teacher.
Right on.
All right. But yeah, if you want to interact with us, that's always cool to do. We always like to hear from people and have a good time and chit chat
Yeah.
and all that good stuff,
I
right?
think, yeah, we should be out on the other platforms too. Spotify, Apple Casts, Google Casts, all the casts. So
Mhm.
if you look, you'll find it.
If there's a cast, we're on it.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Let us know what you think. All right. Now that we've got that self-promotion out the way.
Yuck.
Guys, I'm just going to start off with this. We've talked about the mechanics of the game. We've talked about a lot of those things. But Dice, I'm going to start off with you. Final Fantasy X as a story. Would you Rate it in your top 3, bottom 3, or somewhere in the middle.
I would say top 3, absolutely. In fact, I would say the story is what places Final Fantasy X in the top 3 more so than a lot of the things like the combat or just some of those other factors, the music, characters. The story, I think, is one of the big things that carries the game.
Sure. Yeah. I think that you make a lot of good points there. Let's see here, Mr. Scooter. What do you think, buddy?
No, as far as ranking it in Final Fantasy storylines.
Yep.
It's definitely up there. I would say maybe top 5. It's a good story. I'm just kind of remembering it real quick in my head. It's basically, the whole idea that someone's life is going to come to the end, in it, by the end of this journey, and following that and helping them along their way. It's a hard story to want to get to the end to, I guess, but because of that, it's very good.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you guys on some of the points that you've said. I think number 8 was really the first one that delved into using time in the construct of time as a medium for the story. But this one certainly does too. So it's definitely taken some storyline from other Final Fantasies, and it has some Final Fantasy tropes that go along with it. But
Right.
it also is very unique in itself. And I'm really excited to talk about this one. So I guess without further ado, for me, I think it's a top 5er. So the thing that I do want to start off with is at the very beginning, when you start the game off, you are immediately brought into a scene, this like dystopian scene where you see all the characters right away, and you are kind of dropped into this little campfire scenario where Titus says, "Listen to my story." So I thought that was a really interesting way to start off a game, because you're like, wait a second, is this the end? And what I'm seeing right now the end? Because I hate that. It's like, okay, I know who's going to live and I know how this is going to play out. But
Right.
That's not necessarily the case that you see that. But I really liked how they opened up the game like that.
Yeah. The musical score, of course, I'm going to mention that. The piano theme that goes along with it during that scene is one of the most memorable ones, that I can think of for sure. And a lot, like you're saying, is an introduction to a game, leaves you with a lot of questions. But yeah, you're also hoping that isn't, like the final scene of the game that you just happen to see right at the start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dice, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know if I have any other thoughts that haven't been expressed already. Great scene. Yeah, love it.
Simple. I like it. So, Dice, I mean, we're all familiar with this, but do you want to kind of start us off with where do we start this journey really at?
And we're talking specifically with Titus, or where are we going? Or are we going before or after the time jump?
We're going right out the gate, like right after I want to tell you my story, where you dropped into this game at.
I mean, you're dropped in. I mean, if I recall correctly, I mean, you're actually like playing a game of blitzball, correct? I mean, you're like straight into like a blitzball scene. I mean, it's this like super, almost like a sci-fi type scenario. There's just lights are like shining all over the place. It's very like disorientating in a way. You're like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
You're watching this new sport take place before your eyes, which actually ends up becoming like an integral part of the story. But as the game plays out, you quickly find out that this is not where the game will be taking place, and you are quickly shifted to another dimension, essentially.
Which, was that disappointing for you, either of you?
A little bit.
I mean,
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, you kind of do wish you would have eventually been able to get back to that timeline, but I don't know. Yeah, Yevon's fun as well, or Shinra. Excuse me.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Or what is
No,
it?
it's gosh, I'm gonna think about it.
Spira. That's
Spira,
right.
Spira, there it is.
Spira,
Spira.
Spira.
That's what it is.
like
Spira.
Spira.
Okay,
You knew.
we got there.
You
We
got
got there.
yeah. It took a little bit, but we got there. Just like it
Bunch
took
of S's.
Titus a little bit. Now, I think
There you
that
go.
as the main character, you are immediately taken out of you're immediately taken out of Titus's world and thrown somewhere else. But you're not sure right away, right? Like you start off and you realize that okay, I am going to be playing as some big time blitzball player, and this is going to be, I don't know.
It's a very fish out of water experience.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is very kind of, he's a really cocky character. Kind of see that he's pretty famous from the get go, and you're kind of like, okay, well, this is reminiscent of maybe another Zidane. Kind of has some Cloud characteristics as far as kind of that cockiness. So right away, you're kind of like, okay, here's a Final Fantasy trope of what main characters have looked like for the last, couple of them.
Hmm.
But immediately you realize, okay, this guy is the real deal at what he does. He's not some joker. He's playing blitzball. It's got that great opening scene, super cool. And not, I mean, we have to mention this. Like, this was again one of the first This was the first PS2 Final Fantasy, so graphics like this were just like, holy moly, this is awesome. And
The best we'd ever seen. Yeah.
the best we'd ever seen. And they really knocked it out of the water in that opening scene. And immediately you're like, or at least for me, I'm thinking, man, I hope I get to play this game that they're playing, because as somebody who enjoys sports, that was something that I thought was cool. But immediately you are, playing, and then this huge, uh, just phenomena happens, and you're like, what in the world is going on? Like, the sea is coming up,
Right.
and there's this gravitational pull, and it's like, well, this is bad.
Right. And you get a little bit of foreshadowing in the story at that point of like mentions of Titus's father being the best blitzball player that had ever lived. So
Mm-hmm.
he has to live up to that. And his father was dead at this point in the story, or so you were told. Um, yeah, it kind of sets you up.
You're definitely in the very beginning. It's like it's clear that Titus's character is living in the shadow of his father, and he hates it.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
very much.
interesting
And he has
dynamic
a lot of
right out the gate.
yeah, a lot of spite for him. You can tell
It's
too.
not like he's a schmuck though. I mean, because he is like the guy for his time, correct? Like
Yeah.
he's still like a renowned
Star
blitzball player,
of player.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
he's still a star. But I agree that he's not the character that his dad is.
Right.
Correct.
And I think that's what, it's kind of driving part of the story is that desire to become better than, I guess, your
Mhm.
father. It continues throughout the whole story.
And not to jump too far ahead, but you're seeing a lot of the beginning interactions between Jecht and Titus from Titus's viewpoint and how Titus remembers it. Because as you move
Right.
along through the
True.
story, Jecht kind of seems maybe a little softer than maybe Titus portrays him or
The
remembers
memories.
him.
Right.
But
Yeah. Very, very true.
there's no doubt, Dice, that yeah, he is he's good at what he does. Jecht was great at what he did, and maybe some of that maybe Titus has internalized some of that. I have to be better. I have to be better than him. Maybe it's just that competitive spirit. I don't know, but that is something that's put in the forefront of players right away.
And that, that does seem to be like a common reoccurring theme with the main protagonists in Final Fantasy games, like this drive to be like the best. You see it a lot with a lot of the main protagonist characters.
Yeah, in 7, it's comparing yourself to Sephiroth, kind of, being the best soldier. In 8,
absolutely.
in 8, you're trying to be the best in the garden. In 9, you want to be the best thief. In 10, you want to be better than your father, or he feels compelled to, be better than his father. Now, kind of in that first scene before you get overtaken by what you come to know as sin, which is an interesting concept of a character in itself. You're introduced passively to this character who's just like not phased at all by what's happening as all of this is going down, and that's Aaron.
And seems out of place to begin with, even in the clothing style. Everyone else seems to be wearing rather, acceptable, quote unquote, futuristic clothing. And Aaron is wearing this like monk's robe almost.
And it's interesting that, like, because I agree, it is futuristic, but when you do like perform the time jump, you go 1,000 years later, right?
Now that's it's a really good point. Is you go 1,000 years into the future. And it's
almost like civilization has regressed a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It is strange because the first time I think we're kind of getting to that point in the story is, Aaron or the Blitzball tournament is mayhem's happening. Sin is coming, destroying the town. Aaron kind of is, like you're saying, Colin, not phased at all by anything going on as the world gets destroyed around him. Grabs you by your collar and says, "Okay, kid," and then we're going into this void, basically, that you have no idea what it is, and turns out to be your dad. But the jump to the future and having it not feel like the future was a very throwing kind of experience, though, like you're saying. I think, what was it? Riku was the first one to tell you that you are in the future.
Well, it's kind of like speaking like a foreign language almost, wasn't she? She was speaking Al Bhed.
Yeah, she's speaking Al Bhed, and I don't think that was clearly something that Titus had ever heard before, because he didn't recognize it at all. And you would think, being the star of the Xander Canaves, you'd probably travel, hither and yon to, different areas to play against these different teams. And, he's not familiar with this Al Bhed language. So right away, something is amiss. Something's weird about where he is at. And he does his thing with Riku, and then gets thrown off by a monster or whatever, and then he ends up on Besaid, I think it is, and he ends up with Wakka, right?
Right, and just kind of washes up on the shore there, and they find him and take him in, and you get introduced to Wakka, Lulu, and then eventually the main character in the story, I guess, in a lot of people's eyes, is Yuna. The summoner.
But even before that, when Titus comes out of the water, he recognizes them throwing around a blitzball, right? So
that's true.
And he's like, "Oh wow, this is blitzball. Like, I recognize this." And Wakka says, "Oh, blitzball?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm the star player of the Xander Canaves." And Wakka's like, "Okay."
Right, good joke. Yeah,
good one. They're 1,000 years old. So, and that is the point right there where you go, interesting. Interesting. Because you're thinking, well, can he still get back? What timeline is this game going to focus on? If he was so easily shot forward 1,000 years, can he come back 1,000 years? So there's a lot to take in the first couple hours of gameplay as far as the story goes, which, let's contrast this to our public enemy number one, and that's Final Fantasy 13, where in Final Fantasy 13 you are just peppered with information like a shotgun
That you
blast of
should
stuff.
already know. Yeah, yeah.
And
And
it's
a
like,
lot of new names.
oh my
and,
gosh, it's so overwhelming that you're just like, ugh, I don't want any of it. But for this, I mean, this is the showing the way to do it right versus kind of the way maybe not to do it. But what do you guys think about that? Do you draw any comparisons to that when you see that?
As far as the intro or opening of the game, sure. I would agree a lot in the sense that I didn't feel too out of place when I first started 10, just the right amount. You know, you're kind of wondering what's going on. You know who your character is. There are some weird names going around, but it's, I don't know, 13. The opening was just more like explosions and Michael Bay stuff to me than anything. So
Lack the subtleties of Final Fantasy X.
yeah.
Dice, what about you? Or I'm sorry, Scoot, keep going.
No. That was it.
This is a little off topic, but from now on, every time I hear Waka, I just chuckle to myself and think of Waka as being Scoot's favorite character.
I had
I'll defend it.
I had Justine listen to that part. Waka. Got a good chuckle out of it.
Why?
So that was just a comparison that I drew, between the two and thinking about it. But it is on Besaid, kind of like you talked about, Scoot, where things start kicking up, and it's very quick that it's like, okay, well, you can either go along with this, or, well, you really don't have another option. You're 1,000 years out of your time. So, and he's trying to figure out how to get back, and he realizes, okay, this is the only really way that I can go about this, is I just need to go along in this story. So he kind of joins up and says, well, I'll be this kind of de facto guardian.
Yeah, I mean, he really doesn't have much of a choice. You know, he's 1,000 years out of his place. So it kind of makes sense. It's kind of one of those things that it seems like he just fell into. And but fate was somehow pulling the strings there, because even him showing up on that shore to begin with to meet Waka on Besaid, was that random chance?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. But from there, then we start rolling kind of into the story. And in Final Fantasy X, you are kind of going from place to place with Yuna and the crew, as she is essentially acquiring these skills to hopefully defeat Sin in the end.
Right.
Dice, you want to kind of talk about that journey at all?
Well, I mean, basically, you're the whole kind of Yuna theme basically goes around this Yevon religion, right? And their belief is like that is there like an actual timeline to it? I can't remember if there's a timeline how often Sin comes. Is it every like so many years? I can't recall that for sure.
I can't remember if it's that or if it is like there's a presence of Machina that is too high and Sin has to come and clean house every now and again.
Yeah, regardless, every so many years, Sin returns, and there has to be like a sacrificial lamb who gives up their life in order to relinquish Sin for another X amount of years. And this has just been a cycle that's been going on and repeating for you don't really know how long. But it's definitely, you get a sense from Spira that this has been happening for a long time. The citizens are kind of tired of it. It's kind of like a downtrodden civilization. They're ready to be done with this.
Yeah, and they know that this is cyclical.
Yeah.
So it's
when Sin comes, I mean, he like ravages these cities. It's not he's not killing a few people. I mean, he's like demolishing. He's leveling towns.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Scoot?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of what other things to add at the beginning of the story there. You all kind of agree to become the Guardians, like you said, Colin, earlier, and start on the path of collecting the Aeons.
Yeah. The other big thing that we have to mention at this point is the growing like relationship between Yuna and Titus, which is,
Right.
is one of the main things that carries the game.
Right. Yeah, it's a good love story. I mean, it's awkward at first, as most are, and towards the end, though, it's a good story.
And we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast. And I know, Colin, you were saying you wanted like more strong, like powerful female characters.
Yeah.
And and for me, Yuna's character was okay because it was important for her character development. She started off as like kind of like that unconfident character. She wasn't very expressive, but as the game progresses, she starts to become a little bit more confident and powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
I was kind of, and after we talked about this last podcast, I was kind of like reflecting on all the like the popular relationships of the Final Fantasy games. You definitely see like this yin and yang characteristics to like the lead male and female. Like for Titus, he's kind of the cocky, arrogant guy. Mm-hmm. And then Yuna is a little bit more unconfident, not unsure of herself. Mm-hmm. But you kind of see as the game progresses that both of those characters start to become more towards like a midline, like a better version of themselves, kind of adopting some of the characteristics from their counterpart.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that that's reflected in the way that Titus tells the story, because it's clear when he is telling the story and reflecting on it, he is very more subdued, and he is a very different version of himself than when the story is actually happening and when you're playing it. So yeah, I agree with you there. And I think that you're right about Yuna. She does grow into a more confident version, more central character. So I do agree with that. It would have been interesting because you definitely could have told this story through Yuna's viewpoint as the main character. Like, I understand Titus' his role in it, and it's really important that what Titus brings to the story, but this is one that could have gone either way as far as the main characters go, because like we talked about a couple weeks ago, we didn't say Yuna as a great supporting character because she was really a main.
Yeah, and I mean, they took it a step further in the next game and made her the main character. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense. Yeah.
So during this, Yuna has her kind of explains what it is that she is doing, and this whole Yevon thing is pretty unfamiliar to Titus, because like many religions, they have a starting point, and people before that time would go, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Like, this is not something that was a religion or existed when I was when I was banging, to quote George Costanza. But he kind of comes in and it's like, oh, you guys are doing the Blitzball celebration symbol, and it's like, no, that's how we worship our God. And I find that as a funny like commentary, like a societal commentary almost.
Yeah. Times change.
Yeah, and that's times change. That's exactly right. So he's kind of like, okay, you guys are like really into this Yevon thing, and I don't really understand it, but I'm gonna come along for the ride. And you guys are guardians and can go into these temples, but I can't. I'm not sure why. Like, Titus doesn't understand the nuances and the complexities of this religion. He is really kind of flummoxed by, okay, well, why can't I go in, and why can this guy do this, and why can these people do this? And like, it's an interesting thing to watch him try and figure this out.
Right. Well, and also not really care about it at times. I mean, Uh, he doesn't understand it or subscribe, I guess, to it necessarily. So
Mm-mm.
he a lot of the customs that are normally observed are clearly just lost on Titus. I mean, that one scene where he runs in after Yuna at the very beginning in the temple because she's struggling with the trial that she has to complete to get the Aeon. You know, everyone's yelling, "You can't do this! You can't go in there! You know, it's forbidden!" Blah blah blah. And he just opens the door and says, "Well, no, I don't care. I'm going in."
Yeah.
So it is an interesting kind of part. I mean, it's a huge part of the story. The Yevon, the Yo or New Yevon, and all of that stuff. They are kind of controlling the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a and it's seen as a way to like, okay, well, if we do this, this is how we can maybe bottle up and defeat sin or keep sin from coming, or trying to figure out like how do we keep bad things from happening. Well, maybe it's this Yevon character that allows us to do this if we're like good, and if we do things the right way, then Yevon will keep us from sin. So I don't know. It's a
Yeah, no,
really big part of the game. That is a real interesting part of the game.
and it becomes a lot clearer, kind of what's going on with all that towards the end, especially. That's when you go to the holy city and discover some of the evil characters, I guess, in the
Mm-hmm.
story towards the end there. Yeah.
Dice.
Loving it so far. Loving it so far. What else we got? Bring me more.
Well,
I'm just waiting for that X2.
okay, all right. Well, as the game goes on, and kind of this like there's these relationships that need to be maintained, and these people that need to be pleased, and these alliances that need to be made very, very like feudalistic, very kind of medieval in that sense. You come across one of the bigger characters, and that's Seymour.
Yep.
And a just a more kind of gross.
What a great voice actor for him.
Oh
It,
man,
it was just perfect.
yeah, and a better antagonist, it would be tough to find.
Yeah.
But him and Yuna are to be wed, and that's not a union out of love, but one out of connection, and one out of like, okay, well, you have to do this for Yevon, and do this for the religious sake. And this is another time where Titus is like, what? What?
Yeah. This doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this? Don't you have any feelings towards me? What have we been doing this whole time, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But she sees it as still another piece of the puzzle that she has to complete because it's part of her duty. So and then go ahead, Colin. I was going to say that's a great cutscene is when you go in and save her.
Yeah, and that's just, I think that's her piety, that is shown through there. Like she's like, I have to do this, like for people. Like if this is something that helps vanquish sin or stop sin, like this is just something that I have to do.
Yeah, and at this point, all eyes of the world are on her because she is the one hope. So
Yeah, she's the final hope. Exactly.
right, it's a lot of pressure for a kid.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting. And it's funny because Kamara and Lulu and Waka are like, yeah, this is like something that you have to do. Riku is a little bit more like I don't have as much like skin in the game here, and
Right.
Aren is just like, I'm gonna come and go as I please. Like I'm just here to protect. This is just what I have to do.
Because I know what's going to happen anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Doing his-
Titus is like, my feelings, and I'm 1,000 years removed, and like I like you, and da 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 da. So it's
And I hate my dad.
Yeah.
And
I hate my dad. So a lot of that is that's a real interesting dynamic between those characters. Some that totally understand why Yuna is doing what she has to do. Some that are indifferent to it, and some that are just like, this is dumb. Like, I don't know why you're doing this. Like, you shouldn't do this. And to the point where everybody else is like, well, you just don't get it. You just like, you don't understand why she has to do this. And you're being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But then he eventually kind of brings a few of them around anyway. And then you go rescue her and kind of continue on this rogue journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, eventually, like, you are kind of that, like, I don't know if excommunicated is...
Yeah, no, that's the right term I would use, yeah.
So you're kind of booted out, but she still feels like it's her duty to fulfill. Like, she still has to do this. She still knows that she can, whether she feels like she has Yevon's blessing or the Yevonites, whatever blessing or not. So yeah, it's like kind of like this rogue adventure that she continues to stay on. And at this point, Titus is like, what are we doing? Like, this is, it didn't make sense before. Now it double doesn't make sense. Like, this is ridiculous. So you jump from temple to temple, and you got to gather these Aeons, which are Espers, Guardian Forces, summons, what have you, and you're kind of collecting them. One of them that's not in the temple, though, is Dyston.
Oh, Yojimbo?
There you go, Yojimbo.
Oh, you better believe it. Best summon in Final Fantasy.
He subscribes to no temple. Come to the temple of
he
Yojimbo.
Lives under the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you find him or something. I forget, but yeah.
So, I'm trying to think about where I was there. So you're go ahead, Scoot.
Well, yeah. Once you kind of save Yuna and get her back on the journey again to save the world and defeat Sin, it pretty much is just kind of a matter of defeating Seymour on your way and getting to the end. Trying to think if any other big storyline things happened between that point and the end. Man,
Seymour, yeah, I mean, Seymour clearly is not a good guy, and you figure that out relatively. I mean, you kind of start to figure it out by some of the subtlety and some of the subtle things that he does or says, and then it becomes pretty obvious that he's not a very good guy. And then when you're on Mount Gagazet and you have to battle him, which is probably one of the toughest boss battles, and I would argue the toughest storyline non-final boss battle in Final Fantasy history. I mean, like Emmy and Ruby, yeah, those are probably tougher, but they're not vital to the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about getting beyond that fight is a big turning point in the story too, because that's, I think, when the story becomes current. He's no longer narrating the past,
Yeah, it's soon after that, because I think it's after Xanarkand that where you guys are camping out. He's like, I want to go to Xanarkand. It's like, okay, well, they go there and it's nothing's there. It's not as he left it, and during this, Titus is kind of fighting his own battle of trying to figure out where he is, and the Aaron is. I love Aaron as a character. He withholds a lot of information that's pretty vital to the story, as far as like from Titus, and kind of like drops the bomb on him eventually. But that's a really interesting aspect of the story as well, is when eventually, and big spoiler alert, you're fighting with Aaron, and Aaron's like, well, I'm already dead. Like, I'm not actually here. Like, I'm a spirit.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah. And it's like, remember me 1,000 years ago, and now I'm here? Well, it's because I'm dead. By the way, so are you. So Titus is like, what?
Yeah, why am I here?
Yeah, and then there's the, this is kind of I guess it's not confused. Like, you kind of have to pay attention. This is one of the stories you kind of got to pay attention to like figure out, like, why is it that they're dead, but they are not when Yuna does the sending.
Sending to the after. Yeah.
Yeah, does the sending. It's like, okay, well, why doesn't Arin go, and why doesn't Titus go? And so there, there's a lot of these kind of like nuance points for this game that it's like you kind of detailed that you have to pay attention to, because if you're not paying attention, if you're just banging through cutscenes or whatever, you might lose it a little bit. But it's those small details that really make the story great, I think.
Yeah, I mean the ending when it finally reveals itself, I thought was really really good. It was interesting. It was almost heartbreaking too when you hear that Warren says, "Yeah, I'm dead, by the way."
Yeah.
I forget the speech he gives, but it was a good one. And then that the scene after all of that when you're there with is it Braska or your father and Arn, and you all just kind of walk into the distance and fade away.
Back to the far plane.
Yeah. But then there's the conversation about the ending, the final cutscene of the game, which is contentious, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, before we get there, like the whole time as you're walking through this story, you're also kind of walking through the story of Titus coming to terms with the fact that maybe his dad is a little bit different than he remembers him, and maybe his dad wasn't as selfish as he thought he was, and he wasn't as like big of a jerk as he thought he was, and he starts to have this internal battle and he starts to realize, okay, maybe my dad was, maybe I don't hate my dad, because at the beginning of the game, I hate you, he tells him I hate you.
Right.
And then he starts to come full circle and realizes, okay, you're not the problem. Like, you're actually pretty selfless guy.
Well, he used that hate to save the world, basically, is he knew that his son would come after him because of how he viewed him, and it worked.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So that's a kind of a cool like subplot line, one that meshes in with the with the full plot line, but it is kind of a cool way that they integrated that in there and continued to kind of come back to it. Aaron, was a guardian with Jack for Braska. So he had all of this like insight and was able to show him these things and through the spheres or whatever. So that was pretty cool, and I really like that. Now, at the end where it's like, okay, you have to, you fight Sin and then you fight Unileska, and it's like, okay, Yuna's gonna die because Yuna has to use the final summon, and everybody's cool with it except for Titus.
Right.
And then they kind of figure out like a way to kind of get around this. If I am mistaken, I played it recently, but I'm always forgetting.
With the Yu Yevon bit at the end, I think is kind of how it was circumnavigated, but I would have to play the last sequence to remember exactly what happens.
Yeah, and then that final scene where which the scene where Yuna kind of figures it out, and that kind of that final scene is like, okay, I think it's the final scene where she figures it out, or leading up to it, where she realizes like what has to be done. It's in a lot of ways it's kind of Fight Club. The way they drops the like I'm dead, like I'm not, boom, like that's a big a big drop
twist.
off, a big twist, and then where like they're going to like hold hands or something like that, and their hands kind of like go right through each other, or they go to hug or something like that, and they go right through each other as Titus is kind of fading away. It's kind of like that Tyler Durden character now is going away at the very end there.
Right.
So that was a really interesting piece.
And I mean, it like I said, it tugs his heartstrings because you realize the love story is no longer. You realize Aaron, all these things that you wanted aren't happening.
Yeah.
So it's a good ending.
It is. Go ahead, Dice.
No, I mean, it's everything you're saying so far, loving it. Um, what did you guys think of when you saw the final post credit scene? What did you guys
Right.
think?
So, and Colin, and for everyone out there, I guess the specific scene that we're probably talking about now is when Titus, or it's the scene is basically the ocean with a sunset kind of, and it's the Besaid uh, island beach, where you first wake up and you find Walker and the team and everything. And it's kind of calm, and then popping up out of the water to get a huge breath of air is Titus. And you see him glance towards the shoreline, and you can't see who's on the shoreline, but he kind of smiles and starts swimming towards it. And then it goes to black. So the question is, A, did he survive in the end? Is he still alive?
Mm-hmm.
B, which timeline is he in? Because you can't tell from that little bit of the cutscene where exactly, even if it was on Besaid Island necessarily, but sure looks like it. And what becomes of all of it, or if that even was Titus. That's also been a piece of contention after X2, I thought.
Yep, absolutely.
So there's a lot of questions that you're left with at the end of the credits. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
Again, very Fight Clubby in the sense of like, okay, well, what goes on to happen? What happens with Tyler Durden? Does he actually survive that? Does he come back? What happens with Marla and the narrator? And, not exactly the same, but I think that there are some similarities definitely that you can draw between the two. But I think that it does do a good job of kind of allowing people to speculate and say, okay, exactly what is your interpretation of maybe what happened with that? So, I mean, I thought it was a great way to end the game. I thought it was that final scene, definitely, a sad one, but it's good. It's a good game, and the only thing that if I'm Titus and I'm like, holy smokes. Aaron, like, you see me falling for this girl, like, can you let me know, man? Are you kidding me?
Just a little heads up. I was gonna, never mind, but buddies first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
kind of thing.
It's like, let me know, man. Let me know. Give me a break. Yeah. You see what's happening here. I'm gonna die. I'm not even real.
Yeah. And doesn't tell you any of it.
All right. So X2, which is something that I'm not as familiar with, but I know that you guys are. So why don't you go ahead and bring us into, like, I'll have questions as to how this goes. But I'm curious because I played it a little bit. I was really turned off, I'm not going to lie, by the simplicity of the Blitzball.
Oh, if that's okay.
You know what's funny about X2? So how long after Final Fantasy X did X2 come out? What was it? Maybe a year or two? I can't recall exactly, but would you say like a year or two?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I recall X2 a lot more than 10. And I think it's because I had to defend it a lot to my friends. I had several discussions with many friends being like, oh, X2 was garbage. And me getting into very heated debates about X2 and why X2 was a good game. So I think that's why I recall X2 a lot more than 10. But one of the big things I loved about Final Fantasy II is you're dealing with the repercussions post-Sin, right? We
right.
In Final Fantasy X, we have this big religion, this Yevon religion. And you kind of find out near the end of Final Fantasy X, these guys were kind of sketchy, and these guys kind of were telling some lies. They held all the power in Spira, and then in X2, there's a little bit of a political change. You kind of see these different factions kind of building up and kind of trying to take over that power that Yevon had. So for me personally, that political aspect of it, almost like that Game of Thronesy type feel. Right. To the atmosphere. I love that. I said, oh, okay, yeah. this is something I could see definitely happening if this were to happen in a fantasy world.
I remember being very skeptical about whether or not I was going to enjoy the game or not. As soon as you kind of get the disc, I mean, it is a total turn from the original as far as presentation, music, style of art. All these things have changed. It's still definitely Final Fantasy X, but Yuna is now the main character, and she's the lead singer of this super famous pop band. And it's instead of the stadium, of the opening scene of 10 with Titus being the star of Blitzball, it's in that stadium with her giving a concert. And
what can I do for you?
I was very, I don't know if unenthused is the word, but it was, I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it a go.
I would say I was very caught off guard by how different the tone was for the game. Absolutely.
And I think that's another point, though, is that it's like you're saying, it's post Sin, it's the calm era, and everybody is now.
People are much more cheerful.
Happy is the word. Yeah. Yes, is the world is happy, and they're celebrating, and there happens to be a lot of glitter and stuff with it, but it was as far as the game went, I mean, there was some changed game mechanics in the fighting style and stuff I thought worked okay. It kind of picked up where it left off, though, for a lot of the things. And, I'm trying to think of how else to introduce the game. Oh,
go ahead.
I
was going to say, the game, it's goofy. It's a goofy,
that's a good word.
It's a goofy game.
It's goofy. Yes, it is.
But what I liked about it is it didn't try to hide the goofiness. It was okay with being goofy. It said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to try something different, and we're going to throw this spaghetti at the wall, and we're going to see if it sticks."
Yeah, that's a good point.
And for me, I kind of enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a change up. I liked the change up, especially when you compare it to Final Fantasy X. It with this sin infested world where everyone's kind of sad and depressed. And then you get this complete flip-flop where everyone's kind of cheery now, but we have political tensions building.
Yeah, but the fun bit, too, as someone that has played, the original one first, is you get to go revisit the world again, but in a whole new breath.
Absolutely.
And, new characters along the way, of course, and a new storyline to go with it. But I think that's another point too, is that if I remember right, you get to start the game off with like the airship right away, so it's kind of like a new game plus in a lot of ways. But what else? It's you, Yuna, Riku, and Pain. That's right. I couldn't remember the third character. Kind of a squall of sorts.
Yeah, and Pain's an interesting character too. Pain is almost kind of similar to Auron in that she, like, when you start the game, she's a little bit quiet and silent, but as the game progresses, you quickly learn she knows more than she's leading on. She's one of the characters that's holding back on information a little bit.
Right. I mean, you're gonna have to refresh some of my memory with this one again, Dice. I'm not gonna lie. But where does it kind of start after the first kind of sequence, I guess? What's the goal of the game?
Okay, so and I'm not 100%. I mean, it's still probably been a good 5+ years since I've played it, but let me take a stab at this guy.
Sure.
So basically, what's kicked this whole adventure off to start with, anyways, is that you're looking for spheres. There's a lot of sphere hunters in the world, and it's almost like an artifact, but it can record like memories. And one of the things that kicks the game off is that Yuna finds a sphere of a character that looks eerily like Titus.
Right.
Eerily like Titus. And basically the whole game is that Yuna is convinced that Titus is out there somewhere. So you're looking for more spheres or any sort of evidence that Titus is still out there.
Right. And, that kind of goes back to that final cut scene after the credits of the original is he still out there? And I mean, I kind of, yeah, now that you mentioned that, I remember the game is just basically going around the world again, hunting for those spheres.
Yep,
Um,
exactly. And so another thing that's it's a little bit goofy, but it's important for the story is that you have an important part of the combat is the dress spheres, right? So you find a dress sphere that when Yuna puts it on, she kind of feels like almost like this energy with it. She kind of is like really like excited and it changes the way she feels. And as the story progresses, you come to find out that this dress belonged to this character named Lena, I believe is what her name was.
hmm,
And the character that you think is Titus is actually this guy named Shuyin.
right.
And yeah, so the big part of this game is that you're trying to find who you think is Titus, but it's actually Shuyin.
And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but even at the very end of this game, it's still kind of up in question, isn't it? Or am I
It very much is, yeah.
right? So it's, I,
It sounds
yeah,
like.
I
Oh,
mean,
sorry. Go ahead, Scoop.
no, it's just one of those where the ending again leaves you with basically. I felt like if I remember right, I just kind of felt like, well, it ended similar to the first one, in a way, you know. Um, but
Well. So let's okay. So I was just kind of scrolling through a little bit of a guide here, and just kind of refreshing my memory a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
But another big thing that we didn't talk about is that so these two characters, Shuyin and Lena, are actually from this 1,000 years ago with Xanarkin. They're from Xanarkin, which again is kind of interesting that this character looks so similar to Titus.
right.
But it's basically during this time that Xanarkin was at war with Bevel, was it?
Mm-hmm.
There was
Yeah.
going to be like this huge weapon called Vegnagun that I can't remember which side was going to use it, but I want to say it was Xanarkin that was going to use Vegnagun. But they wanted to use this weapon that was this weapon of mass destruction. But apparently the weapon was unable to tell the difference between friend or foe. But Shuyan was still like, I still am okay with using this. I want to kill all these people. But at the end of it, at the end of like when he's about to activate this weapon, Lena comes in, kind of stops him from using this weapon, and then I want to say it's Bavel soldiers that come in and kill the two, and that's basically what keeps Shuyin as in what is the word what do they call Arin? Is it in unsent? Is that the term?
I think so.
Yeah, so he's kind of he almost has like this rage that's keeping him connected to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing it back to the X2, these two so the game after Yevon's been split up, these new factions are starting to come together. We have the new Yevon, which is still kind of has like these religious beliefs. We have the machinists, and then there was one more. I'm trying to recall what that last one is.
As far as the factions,
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the name.
Oh, I'm looking through it right now. Oh, I'm so close. Oh gosh. It's the Youth League. Youth League. And so the tensions are rising between Youth League and New Yevon. And I can't remember which side, but one of the sides wants to use Vegnagun. Wants to kind of re-bring out Vegnagun. And basically, and so what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it sounds just like the story is when you first started talking about it, it seemed like it was a lot less the gravity of it was a lot calmer. It was
it definitely is to start the game.
Yeah, but it sounds like as the game goes on, it becomes more of a serious tone.
Yes, the game when it first starts, you're kind of like you're working as your own thing. You're trying to find any sort of hints of Titus, but as the game progresses, the tensions between Youth League and New Yevon continue to build.
And there's,
and then
talks of wars and battles, and well, there is some during all this, if I remember right.
Yeah, and then the other interesting thing about the game, and I can't remember entirely, but as you're trying to track down Vegnagun, you're having to go to these old temples where the Aeons were, and when you go there, you find out that they're like they've been replaced with almost like these corrupted versions that you have to just slay. So it was just kind of like a fun element to the game where you're kind of rehashing some of this old world you've been through. But suddenly you're fighting these summons where they're not good summons anymore. These are like corrupted summons that are very evil.
Right. The Dark Aeons or something, or
the dark. I think that's the Dark Aeons.
Yeah.
Sounds spooky.
But yeah, and then okay, what else you got, Scoot? What else you got? Any other pieces I'm missing so far?
I'm just trying to think as far as story stuff goes. That pretty much covers it that I can remember. Is there were a lot of other new characters that we're not mentioning that I can't remember the names of. The leaders of the youth league, and then some I'm sure Bevel characters and stuff. Covers it that I can remember, but I mean, it's the thing is that the two games get so melded in my head that they just have become one as I get older.
Absolutely.
So it's hard to distinguish a lot of it.
Absolutely.
But no, that was a pretty good synopsis of it, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and then the other interesting thing about Final Fantasy X2 is that there were multiple endings to the game. Yes. And it depended on what you had to meet certain criteria. You had to have completed certain missions in order to get the best ending. And in the best ending, after you finished the final boss, the Faith talk to you and ask you if you would like to if you'd like to see Titus, if you'd like to have him reconstructed, and that's the only way to get Titus back, which was interesting because I don't think there's been any other games that have had multiple endings.
In Final Fantasies.
In a Final Fantasy, yes.
I would have to really think on that because I'm thinking of other games at the moment. Chrono Cross, I was thinking has like a million, but in this one, can you remind me though, Dice, is to get the good ending, the quote unquote good ending, didn't you have to do like everything in the game?
Oh, you had to have 100% completion.
That's right. Okay, so I definitely did not do everything in this one, and so I probably watched a YouTube clip of the real quote unquote ending, but you do see the real Titus, right?
Yes, yeah. He comes out of the water. They they embrace, and then and then Titus is even like questioning like what he is. He's like, what am I? Am I just like am I built from memories? How am I even existing right now?
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the first scene of him on the island coming out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. A little bit of a callback.
Yeah, very much, very much. So, okay, I guess the real question to you then is Titus real? Is he back?
He is, and it's interesting because because he doesn't know what he is, and at this point you really don't know what he is. You just have to like almost accept him for face value.
Right.
Yeah, somehow the Faith were able to bring him back.
And then they just lived happily ever after.
Yeah. It was a little weird ending when you kind of think about it, but come on, you jerks! Why didn't you bring him back in the first place? Why'd you make you have to do all this work?
Because we needed the to sell tickets for the pop tour for the singing and all that. Yeah. It is kind of a weird full circle sort of ending, but it does complete the idea, I guess. Were there any other add-on games after this, or that was it, right?
That was it. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd finish the story off, I guess. 3 out of 5, Colin. 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5. I'll have to go back and play it because my interest is piqued for sure.
I'm giving it a 4. I'll give
if
it a
you are,
4.
yeah, and in all seriousness, if the game itself is very sound, it's a solid mechanically,
Mm-hmm.
kind of game. But if you are interested in the continuance of the relationship story, definitely give it a try, because it fills in a lot of holes.
Dope.
Or,
Hmm.
Cool. Well,
so,
um, yeah, I'm definitely gonna give it a go because I got the PlayStation 4, Final Fantasy 10, and which comes with X2 as well. So
oh, there you go.
might as well.
Good luck.
I gotta jump back in and play Final Fantasy X. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's so good, so good. I know one of the things that the dress spheres is pretty much job classing, if I'm not
Exactly.
mistaken. Yeah. So and that's
Yep.
something that I'm always a fan of. Job classing. I think that's cool. So
Yeah, I think you could even make Yuna like a Beastmaster or something. It it was kind of weird. You could do Dark Knight. You could do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, you have to check it out. But cool. Well, guys, I appreciate your knowledge on that subject because I had none, or I did not have much to contribute. So y'all did a good
Well,
job.
we did our best.
And
Yeah, you pick up the slack everywhere else, Colin. Let me tell you.
you guys made me so proud. These guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's all grown up.
Oh man. Anything else to where do you think Final Fantasy X2 is going to fall in the your favorite Final Fantasies? Is it a top fiver, bottom five, or somewhere in between?
You know, to go back to what Scoot says, it's very difficult for me to take away X2 and separate it from 10. For me, it really is like it's you get two for one deal here, guys.
Yeah.
I have a tough time separating.
It is like the bonus disc number 2 in the back of the case that
Hmm.
you weren't expecting to get,
Yeah,
Um,
for the same reason that I lump all of the 13 games into one game.
sure. I didn't know there were more than one of 13, but it shows you
3 of them, buddy.
shows you what I know about 13. Um, uh, so I guess I'll just go ahead and say that as a standalone game, again, very solidly mechanically done. It's a good game. It's just not going to be in my top 5.
Okay.
As a
Yeah,
standalone, as a together group game, um, definitely top 5.
if you don't mind leaving your expectations at the door and you go in knowing, hey, you know what, it's going to be a little bit of a goofy game. You'll have a fun time with it.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like if you also play it as a like appreciate it as an extension of 10 and
Yes,
play
play
it
it.
like
Yes,
pretend
play it after 10.
play it like
Yes,
okay, this is the same game as 10. It's just another chapter in that story. It sounds like there's more
yeah,
appreciation to that. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah. I think you guys put it very well. It's definitely different going with new expectations. But yeah,
cool. All right. Well, I think that shores up 10 quite nice. And 10 too.
there we go. We finally did it.
Finally did it.
Boom.
Awesome. Well, anything else for the good of the order, my friends?
Happy New Year's to everyone around the world listening.
Indeed. Indeed. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
cool. All right. Well, hey, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. And like I said before, please interact with us on Twitter at Canary Podcast. Please, let us know what you think of our show. We really enjoy doing it, and getting feedback's always cool. So, thank you again for all the feedback that we do get and the communication that we do get with y'all. But that being said, I guess there's nothing else to do but say it's been real.
It's been fun.
Oh, it's been real fun. All right, guys. Hey, have a good one.
Have a good one, guys.
So, yeah. All right. I have ended my stream, which I don't know if you guys are up for it, but I don't got work tomorrow, and I could do limit breaks tonight.
Okay, if we're doing that, let me make a drink. And then
We're working for this guy.
Ooh.
I was gonna say though,
Okay.
I don't have work tomorrow, but yeah, Dice probably does, right?
Lucky